Hello and welcome to today's European SharePoint Office 365 and Azure Community webinar. My name is Shane and I'm delighted to be joined by Tomasz Positek, MVP KDW Poland, who will be talking to you today about how to boost user experience in your business processes with adaptive cards. Remember to join the conversation about today's webinar on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @EuropeanSP and our hashtag is ESPC20. Don't forget to check out the Resource Center. This is updated daily with the latest blogs, ebooks, webinars, and how-to videos. Simply visit sharepointeurope.com and click the content link at the top. After the webinar, we will have a questions and answers section. Type any questions you have in the questions window. Questions will be selected and answered throughout the presentation. This webinar will be recorded and added to the Resource Center, where you'll be notified by email when it is available. And now I'm going to pass you over to our webinar presenter, Tomasz Positek. Hello, Tomasz.
Hi, hello, Shane. Thank you for this introduction.
Just bear with me here. I'm just going to get you set up. Yep, just doing it here now.
Yep.
Oh, no, wrong one. I've just pressed the wrong button. Bear with me. Working from home, so not used to having my usual setup at work. But
yeah, I'm just searching for this button to take over control, and it doesn't appear this time.
Here we go.
Oh, there it is.
Take it away, Tomasz.
Okay, thank you very much. That's the screen number 2. All right, hello everyone. I'm super happy, excited that I have this opportunity to speak in front of you under those during those hard times when we all have to stick and stay at homes during the lockdowns. And I'm really happy that there are a lot of those initiatives in the community that we can just maybe not every time see each other, but at least we can just hear each other and talk to each other. I really hope this is all going to end up very soon and we'll be able to back to our normal in-person meetings, very, very soon. Today's presentation is about adaptive cards and how you can actually use them basically for the Power Automate and Teams related processes to make them more efficient, less frustrating for users, and that they can help their users to focus on their work and not navigate away from the Microsoft Teams, from the digital workplace they're using and they're working in. So as Shane said, this webinar is on the European SharePoint Office 365 and Azure conference initiative, and I hope you will meet there in November. My name is again Tomasz Positek. Shane, you did really good. You really spelled my last name properly. I'm very impressed. It's not the easiest one, I know. I'm working with Microsoft for over 10 years and I'm specializing mostly in processes. I've been working with Nintex. I'm still working with Nintex. I've been working with SharePoint Designer. I've been digitalizing a lot of processes. So like the flow, the Power Automate is something I'm expertising in. But although apart from that, I'm also working with Power Platform for over 2 years, and for that, for sharing the knowledge, for contributing to the community, I was also awarded with the Microsoft Business Applications MVP Award last year. If you are interested in what I'm writing about, in what I'm working on, then you can just simply follow my Twitter handle or look up my blog posts where I'm trying to write about the most complex scenarios and solutions that I can find. Okay, so having that said, I will just jump right into the presentation itself. The agenda for this webinar is quite short, but it's really packed up full with the information and the demos. So first, I will try to explain why those cards eventually appeared in Microsoft. Then I will briefly go through the message cards, which is still a technology that exists. You can still use them, although it's kind of obsolete and documentation say you should not. We can still leverage and benefit from having the message cards in the environment, in the landscape. Then about the adaptive cards, and at the end, what we can expect from the future, what is already on the market but maybe not available for every device. So just like the next steps and the recap. Fair enough. When we look at the modern communication software, at the online social apps, we are already familiar with all these styles of messages where you see the content that you wrote or that someone else has written, but as well the quite like closed tiles of information that shows a very specific kind of data, like video or image, or maybe a set of images. And we can name these dedicated tiles as cards. So when you look at the software, you can see, and then we can see that actually this kind of content is being displayed across different applications, across different devices in a very consistent way, so that it's always the content, but it's being adopted to the layout, to the experience, to the colors of the application is actually showing this kind of information. So this is what we actually call a card. If we would like to create a definition of the card, then we could simply say that the card is just a tool, a mean that allows you to display your content using the host experience. By the host experience, what I mean is that, for example, when you use Microsoft Teams in dark mode, or Messenger in dark mode, this card is going to adopt those parts of the user experience. So for example, it will display its background as well in a dark color, or if your host has blue buttons or green buttons, then the buttons in the card will also follow this layout, these colors, or that the font family is going to be inherited from the host. So what we do in cards, we are just defining the content and maybe the layout, so the composition of the content. However, how this content is then being displayed, the colors, the font families, the backgrounds and things, this is something that is being inherited from the host. Few words about the history. So why this all thingy started in Microsoft. In 2016, someone realized in Microsoft that there are already several teams working actually on the same features, on the same technologies. So in 2016, Microsoft had an Exchange team working on actionable messages. They had as well the bot framework team working on the cards concept as well. They also had the Windows team working on live tiles. And so they realized that, hey, we have those teams split, but working on the same things. Maybe we can just join them and create something that is unified, consistent, and then can be just shared across these platforms. And so in 2017, Matt Hittinger joined Microsoft, and together with David Clow, they created a team that aim was to simply achieve that goal. So to create a unified solution that can be used across devices, across the hosts. And later in 2017, they already created a message card. So the technology that was somehow inheriting from the actionable messages from Outlook. And later in 2018, they came up with the first fully productive version 1.0 of the adaptive cards. So that is a very brief history. But I just want as well to spend a minute talking about Matt Hittinger and David Clow, because these people are really important to understand why this tool can, well, is already that very much important to the landscape of the communication tools that we have in Microsoft. Matt Hittinger joined Microsoft, as I said, in 2017, around that date. And prior to this movement, he was working as a dev lead, overseeing delivery of mobile applications for the high-profile consumer brands. And that period of time gave him, I hope, this kind of knowledge and experience about what users are really expecting from the interfaces, how the good user experience should look like, what should we avoid to make this interaction between user and the content less frustrating. And today, Matt is actually leading this team. He's also very active in the community, doing a lot of meetups, also speaking at the meetups, and you can also follow him on Twitter. On the other hand, we have David Clow, who is working for Microsoft for over, I think, 15 years already. And all the time he was working around the Exchange. he was working on EWS Managed API. He was actually one of the fathers of the creators of that web services. He was working with OWA, and when he joined Adaptive Cards team, he, for example, created the designer, so the drag and drop designer I will be showcasing in a couple of minutes. And right now he's working on integration, or maybe to make adaptive cards and actionable messages more consistent, so that you will be able to post as well adaptive cards just straightforward to Outlook without any prior modifications. Now, what makes the cards built by Microsoft, but actually in general the cards so special and so, well, yeah, important to use, I mean, in this area of communication? Well, basically, the first thing is that they are being natively rendered. So you don't have to create a card and then publish it somewhere, and then application is not downloading the card and just displaying it. You're just providing content, and then the host is actually rendering the card live. Next thing is that, as I said, it automatically adapts to user experience. So again, you don't really have to take care about crafting your card per each device you want to display, doing a lot of rules in the layout layer that will display the card differently based on the black background or white background. It is all done by the host. And thanks to that, this technology is quite cheap because you really don't have to spend a lot of time on creating those items. And lastly, it's very secure because it is following a very purely declarative code. It is just a JSON that has its schema, and then you can't just put there anything that is outside of the schema because it won't be rendered. So in case you'd like to inject a malicious code or any other thing that could potentially damage or harm a user, then with adaptive cards it's just not possible. On the other hand, it is also a platform really cool for developers because it also have the extensible schema. So if you take the SDK and you want to build your own application, you can actually add to the schema things that are not in the official scope, but you'd like to have them work. Also, adaptive cards, or the cards, are not only used for displaying content, but as well for the interaction. So you can use them for to trigger opening URLs, but as well for sending back contents from the forms that are within the adaptive cards back to the host. And also, what is important, from the day one, the adaptive cards technology is supporting text-to-speech software, so they can as well be like read by those tools and be used by people with some disabilities. Right now, I'll just jump to message cards. I don't see any questions. I don't know if there are any. Shane? No? I guess not. All right.
No, there's no questions so far, but
yeah,
if anybody wants to ask a question, go for it.
Yeah, sure. All right, so that was just part of the introduction. The message cards is a technology, as I said, of the past. It became like obsolete in 2018 when the adaptive cards arrived. And right now, when you open the SDK, sorry, the documentation page, you will see that there is a huge post written that this technology should not be used, and if you're able, then just jump onto adaptive cards. However, they have features, functionalities that are not available in adaptive cards that makes them still quite a competitor in my opinion. One of them is the ability that allows them to be posted to the webhooks. And then, well, Teams allows you to post content by the webhooks, and that is important because with this approach, they are just somehow more flexible than adaptive cards. On the other hand, they are very limited around what you can actually achieve with them, how you can craft the content. Their schema, as you can see here, is very simple. It is just divided into two major blocks, the section. There can be multiple sections if you want to multiply the controls that are within the section. And always at the bottom below all the sections, there are actions. So actions to open, toggle, post, and just trigger any other activity. But as said, this schema is very simple and it doesn't allow actually to just do very fancy layouts. And with that said, I wanted to jump to the first demo of the message cards, because as said, I still value this technology and it's still giving some benefits from using it. So the scenario I wanted to show you is about having a canteen in the office. And this canteen is, the employee in a canteen is every day posting a menu to the users. And then users within a Teams channel are able to respond and order what they want to eat, and then this food is being delivered. And of course, I would be able to do it in the Power Apps, for example, but this approach with message cards and just having a form within a conversation makes it just much more faster to interact with the user, and the responses are being collected immediately. And on the other hand, this delivery time was just extremely fast. It's just a single adaptive card and 2 flows. So, sorry, message card. The idea behind here is that this flow is being triggered by the manual trigger, and then once it is triggered, it creates the message card content, and using the webhook, it is submitting it to the dedicated channel in which, or with which this webhook is being bound. So let me show you how it works. I'll just run it right now. Maybe a steak. All right, I'll just check if my Teams is opened. All right, it's opened. So now once I run it, you will notice that in a while, yeah, it's already here. This is a message card that has been created by that flow. Now, what you can see here about the message card is that first, its width is extended to the full width of the message tile, plus its height is being collapsed. So to see the whole content, I need to click this small icon, see more, see less. So let me just fill in what I want to order. Now, once I hit the submit button, you will notice that in this scenario, the content of this card will be closed and replaced by the new card. But the configuration of this technology allows me to simply leave this form open so that it can be filled multiple times. And then every time it is filled in, actually, I can register a response from it. But for this scenario, I just wanted to show you how it looks like when it's being closed and replaced with the new content. So you see that it has been already replaced. It is confirmed that my order is received, but the new card that is being used to replace the previous card is still following this consistent layout. So it is not actually different to what user saw in the first place. So the important thing about this communication is that with a message card, I'm actually able, I just want to show it to here, I'm actually able to define this target URL here. With adaptive cards, it's not possible. With adaptive cards, the post action is always submitting the contents back to the host, and then the host is responsible for handling this request and doing something accordingly to how it is programmed. With message cards, it is much more flexible. I can define where I want actually to post this response. In this case, I am simply posting it back to another flow that is being triggered on the HTTP request trigger that looks like this. So once it's being triggered, it simply calculates what the final price should look like, and in return is sending a new message card that is being used to replace the original one. And what you can see here, if I change this card update in body header to false, then my message card won't be replaced until this is true. So this way I can receive multiple responses. And this is why I really value the message cards, because thanks to that, I am able to post simple or even more advanced forms to channels in Microsoft Teams and actually record multiple responses. In adaptive cards, what I will just showcase in a minute, you're only able to record one response. Okay, so let me just jump back to the message cards. On the other hand of the message cards, we have adaptive cards, which is the successor of message cards. So it inherits all the good functionalities, all the good features that were present in message cards. Plus, of course, because it is live, it is being developed, it is being still built, it has a lot of more new cool features, new functionalities that are not present and won't be present in message cards. So now I will just focus on adaptive cards, and I will try to show you how you can actually use them in the processes. What is also important in adaptive cards is that its SDK is open source. You can use it. It is hosted on a GitHub, and it is already implemented in majority of Microsoft applications. So you can use adaptive cards in Outlook. You can use them in Teams, in Cortana skills, in Windows Timeline, as well in the bot framework, in Azure bot framework. Plus, it will be as well available to use in Power Virtual Agents in September. No, by the end of July this year. So end of July, for beginning of August this year, adaptive cards will arrive as well to Power Virtual Agents, and therefore there will be another new tool on the market that will be actually benefiting from using this technology. On the other hand, adaptive cards are is a very cool technology for developers, because the SDK of adaptive cards is already present and available for the majority of the open source development platforms. Some of the SDK was built by Microsoft, by the team. Some of them, like Flutter or React Native, was built by the community. So just imagine how the community, what is the community around this technology, and how responsive it is and how active it is. Because it's really cool to use adaptive cards in your own custom applications, as it really saves you quite a lot of time in building the interfaces. You can actually just use them to visualize the content, forms, tiles, and whatever. Then the adaptive card schema is a little bit more complex, or I would say more elastic or more flexible. This image shows a schema of the version 1.0. With version 1.2, the actions don't have to be actually always at the bottom of the card. They can be anywhere in the content. So starting the version 1.1, this layout, the composition is just more flexible. And with adaptive cards, we have again, like two major blocks. So the body, where the contents are, and then the actions that contains all those triggers that we can use to triggers or form inputs that user can use to interact with this card. Inside the body content, inside the body area, there are a number of containers that can be used, like the column set that somehow tries to display content as in a table, or a fact set that you can see here. That's a fact set. So it shows a key value composition. There is also an image set, which is kind of a gallery. So you can put multiple images and then they're just displayed together. And of course, there are a lot of controls you can use, like input text or rich text block, or media or image. So there are a lot of things you can actually use to compose the card. Now, how you can build your own card, maybe you could ask. There is a dedicated tool, as I mentioned, created by David Lowe, that is called just a designer. You can access it by typing in a browser adaptivecards.io /designer, and this tool actually helps you to should have refreshed it in the first place. And this tool actually helps you to design your card using a drag and drop approach. So it is the tool dedicated to power users that might not be the best JSON coders in the world, but having this ability to simply drag and drop controls onto the canvas, we can actually craft the card in the way we want. Then once we put those controls on the canvas, there is a lot of properties we can use to look, to even design this card to look even better. Some of them are actually not supported by every host. So for example, starting version 1.2, we can use conditions within the layout, and they are not being yet supported by Teams, that despite the fact is using version 1.2 of the SDK, I think, has not fully implemented it, or maybe it's not supporting the full scope of the SDK. For example, apart from the conditions that we can just rule what parts of the card should be displayed under which circumstances, we could be as well using the media control that would let us to play a video right from the card, right from the conversation in Teams. But for some reason, this is still not working. So you can place this video control, but it won't be rendered. The other thing is, for example, we have these styling options. We can style buttons to display different colors. And that's, again, the property that is present in the version 1.1, but we can't use it in Microsoft Teams. So we just have to really test what we will be displaying to the end users, not to surprise us and not to surprise users. And there are multiple other tools we can use to really craft those adaptive cards in a way that will really be displayed the way we want. So, for example, we have App Studio in Teams. Now, App Studio is a visualizer that we can use to actually display a card that will look like in Teams. So it won't show us anything that is not supported by Teams. So we can use it to actually be sure that the card we want to use will look good. We also have Adaptive Cards Viewer for Visual Studio. We have WPF Visualizer for Windows applications. We also have a very handy tool that we can use when we are trying to post an actionable message to Outlook that is called Actionable Messages Debugger for Outlook, so that if we are struggling with this actionable message and we just can't make it work, we don't know what request response it is being sent back and forth, we can use this debugger to actually debug the card and then see what's going on, why it is not working. And lastly, there is still the message cards playground and the playground for actionable messages that we can use to craft those old message cards. But it's not as fancy as the adaptive cards designer, because you can't just drag and drop controls onto the canvas. You have to write them in the pure JSON. Very well. So I will now jump on to adaptive cards demo. I still see no questions.
There's only one comment in, and it is, can you also share some of the day-to-day use cases for adaptive cards?
Yeah, sure. So that one is going to be, I think, more day-to-day. So here the idea is that we have a company that is actually receiving a lot of invoices. And for this purpose, I decided to use as well the AI builder that is being used to discover data on the invoice. And then what we want to do is to simply have an approval for the invoice so that it can then go into for the processing. So what is done here is that first I built the model. So it's a model built on top of the forms processing. I put here like 5 invoices. So just one remark here: if you're building your own AI builder models, just bear in mind that you have to create a separate model per each layout of the documents you want to process, because even if those layouts are kind of similar, then there is really no certainty, or I mean, the AI builder will try to maybe match some fields that it recognized on the data that was used for training, but it might not be actually the most accurate. So if you have different layouts, different invoices, different other documents that you would like to process using the AI builder, then simply create separate models for each layout, and then AI builder will just automatically try to use the one that fits the best the document that you are scanning. So I have the AI builder that is used to scan the invoice, to discover fields, to discover data. And then this data is being passed on to Power Automate, that is actually generating an adaptive card and is sending to the Teams channel, or it could also send it to a specific user for the approval. So with this approach, we are not actually requiring user to navigate away from the digital workplace in which they are supposed to work. They're not navigating from the conversations, from the documents that they have in Teams. They're not forced to like go to flow approvals or go to email or to any other third-party system to express their approval or rejection. They simply have this approval done in line with their work, so they don't really have to be disturbed by any other activities. And then once they approve this invoice, there is just now a confirmation mail sent or rejection mail sent, but this MVP solution can then be extended into, for example, storing this data into CRM, or I know forwarding this invoice to accountancy department and then to archive it or for payment. So the opportunities or the ways to develop this solution are quite endless regarding the processes that we have in companies. So just let me show you how it works. That's a very simple app. And then I want just to analyze a new invoice that is coming to my company. So maybe I'll just use that one. And right now this invoice is being analyzed, and AI Builder is trying to recognize values on that are actually matching those that have been used for training. So as you can see, the invoice without any discoverable values is just that plain. But then once I switch on those labels, it gets a little bit more fuzzy. And for each discovered, let's say, entity, it is also showing the how it's called. Well, anyway, how certain it is that it discovered it properly. So, like for example, for the bill to and the contact information, this confidence is just 70%, but then for other values, this confidence is around 100%. So the next step I need to do is simply send this invoice for approval. And what you will see right now is that I will be posted here an adaptive card with all the information from the invoice ready for the approval. Okay, there it is. So this is the invoice that has been generated by the Power Automate based on the data that was scanned by the AI Builder from the invoice that was received, for example, by the front desk. Yeah, there is just one quantity missing because it was not discovered, but well, that happens. It's not a perfect tool. But having this all data here within the Teams channel, I am actually able to just simply express my approval or rejection right away without any need to go elsewhere to just navigate away from my work. I as well can put here a hyperlink to let the user open the physical copy of the invoice, the scanned item. So if they're in a doubt, they can just compare the values, but I don't actually need to do that. So what I can do now is just simply express the approval. And hit go. Now, note that once this card was approved, it as well got replaced with a confirmation card, but differently to the message cards, the confirmation card is not following the experience, the layout, the interface that I crafted so carefully for the request card. So it has been replaced with just the basic layout of an adaptive card composition created by Microsoft. Now, how it was done? Well, actually, the approval workflow is being triggered by the Power Automate, and then Power Automate is simply pushing a lot of JSON information from this kind of invoice to the Power Automate, so that you will notice there are multiple variables here to just get value for each field discovered by the Power Automate, sorry, by the Power Apps. And then what is also important is that there are a lot of actions here that I use to build, to concatenate this JSON code of an adaptive card. I spent quite a lot of time to actually be able to generate this adaptive card properly, to get information of all the items that are in the invoice, and simply to have this fully working, properly working JSON code available for me to post it to, you see it's very long, to post it to Teams. So it's been quite a struggle. Now, as you saw, I just used a lot of actions. I put a lot of those outcomes inside the JSON, and I spent quite a time to actually craft this adaptive card. It was good, okay, but I think that it would be easier just to have like a template, right, for this adaptive card, and within this template to have some placeholders that could be dynamically replaced by the data. And by that, I'm thinking about the templates and how they could be used within the adaptive cards. So how we can really even leverage adaptive cards onto the next level. And this is actually available right now in the SDK. What I'm thinking of is called the adaptive cards templates, or the templating. So with templating, we can actually create a solution where we have an adaptive card JSON created, pure created to the publication, and we can have it stored in the repository of our own, like GitHub or SQL Server, or maybe even SharePoint list, and that we simply download this content, bind it with the data, and then post it to the host. And then what host is doing is simply taking the data and is replacing those placeholders with actual values. So with this approach, I wouldn't be ever thinking of creating such a huge workflow where I need to actually craft all those parts of the adaptive card code, then merge it, concatenate it, and then post it. That will be done by the host. So the adaptive cards templating allows us actually to simplify how we develop the workflows, because we don't have to really focus on hard coding all these outcomes. And it is already available in the SDK. So you're able actually to just grab it and use it. When talking about Microsoft Teams, the templating language is also somehow supported, but not fully. So in Microsoft Teams, we can actually just use a very easy key value templating language features. But the templating language itself has a lot of more functionalities that just displaying a value for the given key, or just replacing the label with the actual value. With a templating language, we can, for example, use loops. We can bind data to a different fields inside, or different controls inside the adaptive card. We can as well use a device scope that gives us information about the device where the card is hosted. So with that scope, we can, for example, get information about what the browser is that is displaying the card, what is the device version, name, software that is displaying the card. And then based on that information, we can as well create rules in the card, again, using the templating language, that would show differently the card based on the device. So for example, it would display an iOS logo when we display the card on iOS, or the Android logo when we display it on Android. And this is all that we can use following the templating language. And now let me just show you the same card that you saw here, but being displayed following the templating language and the data approach. So that is the card you already saw, but instead of the values, you can see there are just those curly brackets. And these curly brackets are just the placeholders, can be replaced by the actual data once the card is being rendered. Plus, there are a little bit more functionalities that you don't see here yet, but I will show you. For example, in the beginning of the card, I have this data. So that is a JSON that is actually keeping together all the information I want to show in this card. So I don't have to hard code them in the adaptive card content. I can simply provide this data to be displayed as the card is being rendered. And because, for example, the AI builder is actually returning the data in a JSON format already, in the scenario I just showed you before, the only thing I would really have to do is to just grab this data, put it in adaptive card, and display it. Maybe just change those placeholder names to match the actual keys. Another thing that is done with the templating language is that, for example, this table here, you can see it is only displaying a single row, but because the items is a table, so that's a table data, then the templating language will simply loop over this table and generate or multiply the same structure for each row. There you can also find a formatting. So I can use a formatting in the templating language, for example, to display date accordingly to a format or display currencies. I also have rules. So I can say that display me this label only when the total value is above 5,000. There is also an inline rule for the amount in the row that you just can't see here, but is right in there. That says if the amount of this row is higher than 1,000, then display it using the attention color or attention style. Otherwise, display it in a grid. So with all these functionalities of the templating language, I can really save a lot of more time on creating this card. And then when I post it to the host, it does that. Binds the data with a card and ta-da! Displays all the information inside the card, multiplies rows, follows the rules, follows the condition logic, and I done this card really fast. So that was just a huge saving of time. But with adaptive cards in Teams, this templating language is just not fully supported. So I said you would be only able to create a key and label, and that's all that you could do. All right, so what is the time already? Are there any questions, Shane?
Yeah, sure, Tomasz. I have two here. So it goes, one is, like message cards, you send a custom card back to the user. Can you do the same with adaptive cards? It seems like the response card is just a text in a custom box to Teams.
Right. So that's a good question. Today, when talking about adaptive cards, they're quite limited. I don't know if there will be less limited, but as the question stated, I mean, as according to the question, yes, today, if you want to display this confirmation message, you are only able to send a plain text. There is no way today to replace a card with a new card, as I showed that in the message cards. Furthermore, you are not able to use here any information provided by the user because you define this update message in advance. So that is very, very simple.
Okay, and next up we have why AI Builder.
Why AI Builder? Because with AI Builder, I was able to simply get all the information from the invoice. There was no one required in the middle to retype the information from the invoice to the form or elsewhere. It is just all done by the AI Builder. And this way, it speeds up the whole process of the approval.
Okay, and is there a timeline for the adaptive card features to be available in Teams?
Unfortunately not. So I was trying to speak to the product team, and they don't have any timelines. So I was really surprised, or maybe happy, that we have the version 1.2 already in Teams, because even in December last year, there was still version 1.0 only supported. So nearly 2 years after the first initial release. But no information about the timelines.
Okay. Is it possible to render cards in the Power app?
No. I mean, yes and no. You can use the PCF controller that displays an iframe, and then in iframe you can display your own custom application that displays an adaptive card. But today there is no controller to display an adaptive card, just straightforward. But I just heard from the grapevine that there is something going on to as well integrate Power Apps.
Okay, and in short, which is better to spend time learning? Is it message cards or adaptive cards?
Well, the answer is very obvious. Well, adaptive cards is obviously more worth to spend your time learning, because that's a living technology. It's being extended, developed, and message cards is just very simple. And well, its story is going to end up one day. It's like with SharePoint Designer, I think. But adaptive cards is something that is really being intensively developed, and that's one that is being right on stage now. So yes, definitely go with the adaptive cards.
Great. That's all the questions so far, Tomasz.
All right, thank you very much. So just one thing I wanted to show you about the templating language and adaptive cards. So as you can see, this action to post a message to adaptive card and then wait for the response is quite simple because it is expecting me to provide the content of the message. But if I go into Microsoft Power Automate here, settings, and I turn on those experimental features and reload, then you will notice this card will be replaced with a new version of the card that has two things in place already. So it already has, maybe I'll just create it from scratch. It already has the possibility to define the keys and values, so to use the basic of the templating language, but as well, it has a built-in adaptive cards designer. By the way, these cards are in Microsoft Power Automate since January. Before then, we were not able to just post an adaptive card to Teams, custom adaptive card, and then get data back from it. All right, so just let me show you. So that's a new layout of adaptive of this action. So you're able to define those messages and keys. I mean the keys and values, and as well you're actually able to craft adaptive card just straightforward from the Power Automate. So you don't even have to navigate like away to the designer itself. The designer is implemented inside the Power Automate. But that is something very, very preview and experimental, so that works sometimes and sometimes not as expected. So it's maybe more to just play around and see what's coming up rather than to use in the productive solutions. So as well, I just checked as well those templating language functionalities in Teams, and they are just not working. The only one that works actually is this key value mapping. Okay. So let me just jump on to talk a little bit about the future, a little bit about what is already present in the cool new versions of adaptive cards that we can use already, but are not maybe supported everywhere. But well, if you do, again, create your own custom application, you can just do whatever you want. So as I said, today we already have version 1.2 productively released, so you can really use it. It is implemented in bot framework fully. It is partially implemented or supported in Microsoft Teams. I think Outlook and Cortana is still following version 1.0. And the team is now working on the version 1.3. I will just show you in a while what you can expect from version 1.3. Now, what version 1.1, 1.2 brought us, the coolest features was that we're now able to implement or to input the media control, so just to play music or videos directly from the card without actually navigating user to YouTube, for example. We're also able to put a base64 or data URI images, base64 and S5G images inside the, no, sorry, S5G is not yet supported, but base64 data URI images inside the adaptive card. So for example, when you had this scenario that the image you wanted to display was hosted on the SharePoint, then if you put it directly in adaptive card, even though the user was logged in to Teams, for example, then the thread that was actually trying to get the image from SharePoint might have not been authenticated and the image would not display this way. But since you're able to put the base64 image in the card, you can just encode it right with the card. So there are also some basic inline actions, as you saw, those templating language inline actions. There is also a very basic data validation present, so I can mark which fields are required and which are not, for example. With version 1.3, what is coming ahead, this is just a small summary, is that we'll have a more advanced input validation. So we will be able to use regex to validate if the input is matching a pattern. We will be able to use some conditions to validate the inputs. We will have a more RWD, so the responsive web design layout available as well. There will be like dynamic searchable fields. So let me just show you like where you can find it yourself. So if you go into adaptive cards, sorry. If you go into ak.ms/adaptive cards roadmap, then you will land up on this page that simply shows what is already being launched and what is planned for the upcoming quarters and for the upcoming releases. So what I said about these drop downs, for example, is here, so that you can here you can just type in the drop down and it narrows down the information that is being displayed according to what you're typing. So here you can find all the new cool features that are already coming up in the future releases. I hope that, again, there is no timeline for that, but I hope that the productive release of the Microsoft Teams actions in Power Automate will as well trigger that the Microsoft Teams will fully implement and support the scope of SDK 1.2. Yeah, fingers crossed for that. Now, together with version 1.3 and like the future releases, there is this version 2.0. It's called the vNext. It's like this repository or the backlog of all the functionalities or features that the team has in mind and that might reach a productive version one day. And with that, we have a lot about the templating language, a lot about templating service that is being that the work is being on. And lastly, when I was speaking about extensibility, I just wanted to focus you on the one thing, that if you use the SDK on your own, and for example, you'd like to change a little bit the layout, look and feel of what is being displayed, you can as well extend the adaptive cards to use the Office Fabric UI instead of the default one. So then if you design an adaptive card using Office Fabric, then it can even better integrate on the visual level with the hosts. And yeah, so having that said, I'm slowly reaching the end of this presentation. Are there any questions before I show the last slide?
No, Tomasz, I think we're good. There's no questions so far. So yeah, feel free to keep moving.
All right, so there's just one last slide from myself. So I just wanted to thank you very much for your presence. I saw that there were like over even 100 people at certain moments of time. If you have any questions about adaptive cards, like how to use it, where to learn them, if you'd like to even ask me to solve you some issues around using adaptive cards, then there is like a couple of ways to contact me. So feel free to follow me on any of these social media channels. Again, thank you very much. Stay healthy, stay home as well. And I really hope that one day I will be able to meet some of you in person at one of the conferences, hopefully this year.
Super, Tomasz. Thank you so much for taking the time. And on behalf of the ESPC community, Tomasz, we really appreciate you taking the time to do the webinar today.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Tomasz. Okay, everybody, just bear with me here as I take back presenting to me. We'll say a big thank you as well to okay, so that is the end of the webinar for today. Please see sharepointeurope.com for further details of all upcoming webinars, or visit our resource center for all previous episodes. Again, a big thank you to Tomasz for helping us out today. We really appreciate his time. Thank you all for joining us. Take care and goodbye.